Sup boys, it's your boy Vigrid here, and this is my video on everything wrong with Shaman on Turtle WoW. Before I get started on the bitching and whining and complaining, I just want to mention that, Shaman on this server is dramatically better than it is on Classic. Overall, I think the changes they've made with Class Changes 1 and Class Changes 2 have been positive. They've been mostly moving in the right direction. Yeah, there are still some pretty serious issues affecting the class. This will be more of a whiny and nitpicky video, and if you don't like that kind of video, feel free to move along. I'll go by the most popular specs first and work my way to the least popular specs. So I'll go Enhancement, Elemental, then Restoration. At least that's what I think the most popular specs are. And we'll start off by talking about Enhancement. And the number one issue for Enhancement with a dot, with a bullet point, is threat. Threat is an issue in two ways. The first way is that the overall threat is just simply too high for the damage that you're dealing. And the second problem is that your variance is, when it comes to threat, is extremely high. And there's not a whole lot you can do to predict or control it. So the first problem is like the threat talent. So the threat talent, it works on specifically physical attacks, weapon imbue effects, Lightning Strike, Storm Strike. Now that is the overwhelming majority of the Enhancement Shaman damage profile. One notable omission from this is the shocks. All the shock damage is not included in this talent. So that's going to be Flame and Frost Shock in most circumstances. You will occasionally have the threat overhead to use Earth Shock as well, and it is preferable to use Earth Shock with the Storm Strike damage amplification. But, I'm talking about threat-sensitive context. I'm assuming a threat-sensitive context where it's not a great idea to use Earth Shock because it has a 1.5 threat modifier. It used to be 2.0 before Class Changes 2. It's 1.5 now. But yeah, in a threat-sensitive context, you will be using Flame Shock, keep up the debuff, and then you'll be using Frost Shock. And if you're using like Tier 3 APs, you'll be alternating Earth Shock as well, but that's just, again, that's a threat sensitive context. And the problem with this talent is that it's only 15%. So Warriors baseline in Battle or Berserker stance have 0.8% threat profile, threat modifier. This talented gives us a 0.85 threat modifier on everything but shocks. Rogue has a 0.8 threat modifier. Like all these other melee classes are beating you on damage, and you look at the threat meter and you're riding the tank's ass and they're significantly lower, and it just doesn't feel particularly fair. Now people will bring up like, oh, Tranquil Air, bro, just use Tranquil Air. And Tranquil Air is really good, it's really powerful. The problem is that usually there's only one person in a given group who's being threat capped at any given time. So it's not a particularly good idea to drop Tranquil Air, or it feels distinctly selfish to drop Tranquil Air because you're kind of griefing the damage output of all the other melee or all the other people in your group just so that you personally won't get threat capped. And I don't think that's a terribly ideal solution. So I think the raw threat that Enhancement produces is just a problem. But I also think that separately from that, the variance is a problem. And there's a few things going on here. So the first is that before I even get into Wind Fury, actually, the most important thing to understand is that Enhancement always wants to use the slowest weapons possible. Now, why is that? The reason they want to use the slowest weapons possible is because Lightning Strike and Storm Strike both use non-normalized weapon damage, okay? Now, when it comes to like Warriors and Rogues, you have like Mortal Strike, Whirlwind, Backstab, Sinister Strike, and now even Hemorrhage in Class Changes 2 that all have normalized weapon damage. What that means in plain English is for any like weapon of a given class, you have a normalized attack speed through which your attack power is multiplied by. So you don't get extra damage on your instant weapon attacks just by using a slower weapon in and of itself. You don't get your attack power multiplied by the slower weapon on your instant weapon attacks like Sinister Stab, Backstab, Hemorrhage. And this makes sense. The reason why they introduced weapon normalization in patch, I think it was 1.8 in vanilla, is because they actually wanted higher DPS weapons to be better than lower DPS weapons. So we got like Barman Shanker here from BRD. This was a 2.0 speed dagger. This dagger was often considered to be better than the epic daggers available from Molten Core, like say Corehound Tooth, because it was significantly slower. Just even though the weapon DPS was lower, even though the top end, even in some cases the top end damage was lower, the fact that you got a 2.0 multiplier on the attack power that you had meant that you would often do more DPS with a slower dagger. And this was stupid. This was bad for weapon progression. And they rightly changed it to normalized weapon damage. So it didn't matter what dagger you used. Every dagger was calculated as if it had a 1.7 speed, right? And this allowed them to more easily balance like raid drops. But yeah, Storm Strike and Lightning Strike are not normalized, which means that it inherently means that it favors slowest weapons possible for enhancement. So we're all using 3.8 weapons, and 3.8 weapons, really slow weapons, are inherently high variance weapons, right? They're high variance weapons in that their highs are higher, their lows are lower, right? When you get parried with a 3.8 weapon, it sucks because it's going to take another 3.8 seconds to swing again. And when you get a crit with a 3.8 weapon, it does so much fucking damage because it's a 3.8 weapon. So, it's a high variance weapon. So we've already got high variance weapons when it comes to our damage profile and our threat profile. And then on top of that, you add the Wind Fury Imbue, and it's like you have a 20% chance on any one of those auto attacks to proc Wind Fury and get 2 extra attacks that both have the chance to crit as well. So you've got this extreme level of variance. We've got extremely slow weapons, and then we've got an extremely high variance weapon imbue on top of that is considered like standard for DPS. Like Wind Fury outcompetes all other options. The only reason to use another weapon imbue for DPS is to use the Flame Tongue weapon imbue to drop like fire totems to do like AoE DPS. That's the only DPS reason to stray from Wind Fury. Like Frostband and Rockbiter, they're just not competitive at like the raid level with raid consumables and all that bullshit going on. It's just not even close. Okay, so we've got this problem where the spec is inherently high variance. We can't lower the variance without taking a considerable DPS hit. And, on any other class, you just wait for the tank to do the opener. You confirm that he got a decent opener. He didn't get parried, didn't get fucked over. You see that 2-3k on the threat meter just off the start, and you're like, okay, that's cool. That's enough of a lead. I can get started and doing damage now. But if you do that on Enhancement Shaman, and, the planets just happen to align, you're just going to rip threat with this monster Wind Fury crit, and you just get owned. So extremely high variance on the threat, extremely high variance on the damage profile, and the threat is just too high in general to begin with. One thing I would suggest to address this, the elemental weapons effect for Wind Fury is fucking dog shit. This is so bad. Like, if one of your bonus attacks doesn't land, your attack speed is increased by 30% for your very next strike. Just your next strike, okay? So, you get maybe 6 or 7, like, Wind Fury procs a minute. Maybe, like, when you math this out, when you look at how often you have the uptime of this 30% attack speed buff, I'm not even exaggerating when I say the uptime is between like 3 to 5%. It's in the single digits. This is a very weak, very lacking, very unimpactful talent. This barely moves the needle at all DPS wise. It's so pathetic. I think that this talent for Wind Fury should be replaced with the bonus attacks from your Wind Fury produce X less threat, right? I think it should be the bonus attacks from your Wind Fury produce, 50% less threat or something like that, to rein in some of the insane variance on like the enhanced DPS damage profile. Another thing you could do is just introduce normalized weapon damage for Storm Strike and Lightning Strike. This would also have the added benefit of smoothing out the weapon progression curve. Because as it is now, like, let's say you have Might of Menethil. If you have Might of Menethil right now, what this means is that the only viable option to upgrade from Might of Menethil is another two-hander that's just as slow, if not slower than this. And I think it's particularly bad for tanking shamans, because this applies to them as well. Now, the bulk of their TPS profile is Earthshock, of course, but strikes are still a very significant part of it. And the Shaman TPS weapon progression goes from pretty much Deathbringer off of Onyxia, because it's a 2.9 main hand, to let's say Remnants, because it is just enough of a DPS boost and it has the weapon skill, and it only loses 0.2 attack speed here. So I would consider that the next upgrade. And then after that, it's basically High Warlord. You got to go rank 14 or bust, guys. High Warlord, like, you got to get this High Warlord Cleaver or High Warlord Right Claw Fist Weapon. These are like the kind of item, because they're 2.9. So I feel like the weapon progression is really out of whack. Like, you can't entertain the idea of using faster maces, faster axes, faster hammers, whatever. So, for instance, Mallet of the Awakening, this is obviously supposed to... It's funny because, like, all the enhancement tanking shaman weapons, they just have no defensive stat on them. They're just slow as possible. You look at something like Mallet of the Awakening, and this is a good mace. This is a good tanking mace for basically every other tank class. But for enhancement shaman specifically, it's kind of dog shit because it's a 1.8 mace. It's too fast. Even though, we would appreciate the 2% increased block chance and 21 increased block value and 11 stamina. Those are good stats. Like, this is a perfectly fine and acceptable weapon, but we're never going to use it because it's too fast. Something like Kroll Sharok, right? Kroll Sharok from, or is it Kroll? Yeah, Kroll Sharok. This Axe off of Nefarian, this should be in all circumstances an upgrade over something like Deathbringer, but because it's 0.6 slower, it's actually worse for our weapon progression than just continuing to use Deathbringer. So I think that, I think normalized weapon damage would really be cool. I think another reason normalized weapon damage would also be cool is for like the Spellhanty hybrid builds. If you want to do like a Spellhanty build, use something like End of Dreams, this is probably the best spell power mace available right now if you're clearing Nax, and there's some other stuff beyond in UKH, but like, it's a 1.9 mace, and this 1.9 mace is forever going to do absolutely piss poor dog shit damage with Lightning Strike and Storm Strike, as long as it has non-normalized weapon damage. So yeah, I also think it would be a boon to hybrid builds as well. I think it would just open up a whole bunch of itemization options for tanking shaman, DPS shaman, and spell hands. Like, I don't agree with this non-normalized weapon damage. I think weapon normalization was a good thing. It was a good change they made in vanilla, and I don't know why I wouldn't want to put it forward for shaman here. So yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about enhancements. Let's move on to talking about elemental now, and I have several issues with elemental. The biggest one is I really dislike the lack of identity, loss of identity as the burst caster. I understand that maybe they were trying to like tamper down on burst in like PvP, but they've recently announced that they're going to have to do like blanket spell damage nerfs in PvP anyway to address and like physical damage as well, but to a lesser extent. nerfs in PvP to get rid of the insane burst meta that exists already. So we're already acknowledging that like burst is out of control for not just elemental shaman. It's like discipline priest, arcane mage. Used to be paladins back in the day doing 2k, 3k, 4k holy strikes when they would crit, like all kinds of crazy shit. Warlocks are still pumping. Conflag warlocks will blow you the fuck up too. So we've kind of acknowledged that like spell damage in general is just a problem in PvP. It's not really shaman specific, and even to the extent that shamans were some of the best at it, it should be noted that shamans are not a particularly well-rounded class in PvP. They don't have hard CC. They have basically one school of magic that they hardcast, so they're vulnerable to interrupts. They don't have the best pushback protection. They have some instants they can throw around, and they're a little bit tanky versus physical damage, and they've got a shitload of burst damage, and they've got an offensive dispel, and that's about it. They're a little bit limited. I don't think they're as well-rounded as something like a mage is. I think they have a role, and they do it well, but they kind of need support, and they kind of need it kind of needs to be like a collective team effort to kind of enable the elemental shaman to do what they want to do. And if you just let an elemental shaman hard cast in your face for no reason, you kind of get what you fucking deserve. All right, as far as I'm concerned. But I understand that they kind of wanted to address like the burst damage of elemental, but I really disagree with making electrify the way it is. I think that we should have 100% spell critical bonus, like basically every other caster, with talent support. I'm okay with like stacking up a buff to get eventually 10% nature damage spell bonus, because I think that makes sense. That brings us up to parity with the other casters who benefit from things like Curse of Elements and Curse of Shadows and Improved Scorch and Winter's Chill and Shadow Weaving and all that shit, because we have no like debuff support that gives us like 10% extra damage like all those other schools of magic do. So I think that part of Electrify is fine. That part of Electrify can stay. I don't really have an issue with that. I think that's a good change to increase like our long-term DPS in a raid environment. I think that's a good change. But the critical strike damage bonus of the offensive spells being hard locked to a hard cast of Lightning Bolt and Chain Lightning, it's bad for any sort of enhanced elemental hybrid build like Spellhance thing going on. It's bad for like general versatility of the class, and it's bad for our identity as a burst caster. And I think if we can't be a bursty caster, then what class has better right to it than us? Because I feel like we're relatively. It's very frustrating to combine burst with things like good hard CC or strong survivability tools like, say, Ice Block or Frost Nova or something like that, or Blink, right? We don't have any of that shit. So I feel like we should have an identity as a burst caster and should be able to keep 100% critical strike damage bonus on our spells. So I really dislike the direction for Electrify. And the other reason I dislike the direction for Electrify is that absolutely nothing was done to address the very lackluster pushback protection of our class as a caster. So specifically as Ellie. As Restoration, it's okay, but as Ellie, it's dog shit. So we have a talent, and this is a talent that we share with Discipline Priests. So there are only two forms of pushback protection for Elemental. It's either Storm or it's Earth Shield baseline. So I'll talk about Earth Shield baseline. Earth Shield baseline, while the charges hold, Earth Shield grants you, I believe, 30% pushback protection. Now baseline, Earth Shield is 3 charges, and many Elemental Shamans are going 30 points into Ellie, 20 points into Resto, because their threat reductions here, they've got a crit talent here, they've got they've got the Totemic Mastery here. There's so many talents that Elemental wants to get from the restoration tree, that they don't typically go into enhancement and get stable shields here. So usually you're casting a pretty expensive Earth Shield spell. It's getting ripped off of you in about 8 seconds if you're being continuously melee attacked, and you're only getting 30% pushback reduction while the Earth Shield holds. That is pretty fucking weak. If you do stable for talent shields, it gets a little bit more reasonable as a pushback protection option, but it's still only 30%, which is dramatically lower than in a lot of other casters. A lot of other casters get roughly 70-odd% just baseline from talents, like even Restoration does. Right here in Healing Focus, you can get a 70% chance to avoid interruption. You know, like Fire Mage can get, like, I think it's called Burning Soul or some shit. Arcane Mage's special, they can get 0 pushback at all, but specifically on Arcane Missiles. I don't really object to, like, Arcane getting anything special in that regard. I just feel like it's distinctly dog shit for Elemental. So the other thing is, like, Eye of the Storm, we can get 6 seconds of free casting after being the victim of a critical hit. I really don't like these talents that are based on critical hits. Many talents like this were actually reworked or changed, or we've got versions that don't rely on critical hits and just go off normal hits. So Alkin Frenzy for balance, for instance, is a chance on hit, just a flat chance on hit. And Redoubt for Protection Paladin was changed from chance on crit to chance on hit. I just think it's the superior design. I just think it makes sense. The reason I really prefer chance on hit is because it's just a little bit more consistent. Chance on crit is distinctly, like, weighted towards PvP, I would say. You know, when it comes to mobs, they're just going to have about a 5% chance to crit you. And then when you're fighting mobs that are significantly lower level than you, which by all rights should be pushing your spells back less, if anything, the fact that they're kind of pushing your spells back more because their crit rate is so low just feels very counterintuitive and very stupid. And overall, this talent is just very unreliable, not really worth getting outside of PvP. I don't think anybody really specs this outside of dedicated Elemental PvP specs, right? I think Eye of the Storm is just a very weak talent. We share it in common with Discipline. It's bad for Discipline as well. But at least priests have an absorption shield. If the source of damage is trivial enough, they can use the absorption shield, and while the absorption shield holds, they can effectively free cast. So at least that prevents them from suffering spell pushback against content that's kind of hitting them for piss poor damage and it's relatively trivial, like the example of, low-level mobs beating on me I used earlier. So this is more of like a quality of life thing. I think it's kind of annoying to be like questing or doing stuff out in the world and just face tanking things and having to deal with so much spell pushback, so much unnecessary spell pushback, and having to constantly refresh something like Earthshield to get such a meager chance to prevent spell pushback when so many other dedicated caster classes just get like 70% baseline, if not more. Priest and Mage have various absorption effects that can mitigate pushback. Warlock really only has one in the form of Voidwalker Sacrifice, I think, which is highly niche, but, it's there. I feel like, they just have better... And, I think Alkin Frenzy is just an awesome talent that Balance got that I would love to see Eye of the Storm be replaced with. I'm pretty fucking jealous of Alkin Frenzy, to be honest. Even with the later 30-second internal cooldown, the chance on hit is just a whole lot more reasonable and a lot more consistent. And I just think it's not a thing that terribly comes up a lot in like raid performance, but I think for like general play, like general leveling, general like quality of life, like being in dungeons, anything you can think of, like the spell pushback disproportionately hurts Ellie, and I don't even really understand why. Another way you could maybe change Eye of the Storm, maybe make it so that, like, I don't know, if an individual attack hits you for less than 3% or 4% or some low percent of your HP, then it simply doesn't count as like pushing back your spells at all. That would at least make it like a little more fun in like leveling and like dealing with the open world and getting that quality of life, right? Being so tanky and being able to like shrug off hits that aren't that serious, I think would be a unique way of doing pushback protection that would kind of fit in theme with the fact that, you know, elemental shamans are kind of fucking tanky for casters and they're wearing shields and shit, and, you know, it would kind of feel like intuitive and give you a real feeling of progression to basically just kind of face tank some dudes and just not have to worry about pushback from them. But, you know, when you go into relevant content, when you go into content that can actually challenge your character, pushback is still an issue, right? So I think that would be a bit more satisfying. So yeah, I've bitched about pushback for a long fucking time. Let's talk about fire totems. Fire totems, I've got two major problems with fire totem. The first is a bug that's been acknowledged by the developers, and they say they're going to fix it, but it's been a long fucking time, man. And they're talking about it being a balance change when really it's just a bug fix. All fire totems, Searing, Magma, Fire Nova, all of them do not scale with spell, hit, or crit at all, which is disastrous considering we have this Flame Guidance talent here, which explicitly increases the critical strike damage bonus of the fire totems. And as it stands right now, if you're in full elemental gear like Nax Biss, this is like a 3 DPS talent. I'm not even shitting you. You're like fully consumed elemental Nax Biss. Your Searing totem does 3 more DPS. Congratulations. Like, this is so fucking weak because 17% of your Searing totem shots are going to get griefed by spell hit not being there, no matter what your gear looks like. And it's only going to have a base 5% chance to crit. It's so atrocious. It's so little. It will never be a significant part of our damage profile if it cannot scale properly with spell hit and crit. If basically just under a fifth of our spells are just not hitting. So, absolutely atrocious bug. They told me it's waiting for the next round of class balance discussions. I don't even know why the fuck it's got to wait for class balance discussions, guys. It's got nothing to do with class balance. It's a terrible, horrible bug. All right? Imagine a bug where, like, I don't know, Warlock Immolate just wouldn't crit. Or just wouldn't hit. Like, wouldn't scale with spell, crit, or hit at all. Like, it would be fixed tomorrow. Well, at least I hope it would. I mean, it's just... There's just no excusing it, in my opinion. And the second argument I'll make is that, like, fire totem AoE is too weak. So, let me be clear. Elemental Shaman Cleave is powerful. You know, if you juggle multiple flame shocks, cast Chain Lightning on cooldown, you've got some good cleave. And if it's an intentional balance decision to be like, well, Elemental Shaman have really good cleave, so we're going to give them lackluster AoE, I can kind of respect that. But even keeping that in mind, I still think that Shaman Fire Totem AoE is some of the worst AoE in the game, okay? And I want a distinction. Cleave, I'm talking to like 2 to 3 targets. When we're talking more than 3 targets, I'm talking about AoE, okay? So I'm comparing it to other AoE shit. So, you know, all these other caster classes are kind of shitting on us in AoE. I think the most directly analogous spell to our fire AoE totems is Consecration, because they're both kind of set and forget spells. You know, you set down the Fire Nova, it pops off, it does its thing, and then you set down the Magma Totem, and then you just forget about it, right? You just forget about it, and it does its thing. You set it down, you put it on the ground, it does damage when people stand around it, right? Same thing as Consecrate, right? And I don't want to compare it to like Arcane Explosion or Hurricane or something like that, because those are different. Like, those are like channeled spells, or they're spells that you're spamming global cooldown after global cooldown. You know, I don't think it's fair to compare a set and forget AoE to that kind of more sustained action economy AoE. So I just want to compare like Consecration to Fire Nova. And Magma Totem. So Consecration on this server got its spell coefficient heavily buffed. It got buffed to 8.125%. Okay? 8.125%. and it ticks every second. Okay? 8.125% ticks every second. Unlimited targets. It's wholly damaged, so it cannot be partially resisted. And it cannot be fully resisted. If you're standing in the consecrate, you take the damage. Every single time, 100%, every second. Alright? Fire Nova Totem. If it's talented, it takes 2 seconds to tick from dropping it. And it hits for... it has a 10% coefficient. After 2 seconds. Okay? After 2 seconds. So that's actually lower scaling. Alright? Then when Fire Nova goes on cooldown, you drop the Magma Totem. And the Magma Totem also ticks every 2 seconds. So it's twice as long to tick as Consecrate. And it has a 3.33% scaling. That's right, 3.33%. So that is like, I'd say 2.5 times as low, roughly, as the Consecrate coefficient. And the Consecrate coefficient ticks twice as often. What the fuck's the deal with that? That's insane. That's ridiculous to me. Right? So it's like 5 times less the scaling? Magma Totem compared to Consecrate? Like, that's just fucking ridiculous. Now, in fairness, Fire Nova Totem has a higher base damage. Alright? And that kind of patches it up early on. But by the time you hit about 400 spell power, right? Let's assume you have Call of Flame and fuck it. Let's assume you have Flame Guidance too. If you're an Elemental Shaman with Call of Flame and Flame Guidance, and there's a Paladin, a prot Paladin with no Sanctity Aura, no Vengeance, alright? And you both have 400 spell power or more, the Paladin does more DPS, AoE DPS, not TPS, DPS, than the Elemental Shaman. That's just a joke. I'm sorry. That's just laughably inappropriate. I don't think that's fair in the slightest. It's actually fucking ridiculous, okay? So the scaling disparity is just absurd. Like, the Paladin just spamming Consecrate will beat you using Fire Nova and Magma on cooldown, like, perfectly, right? Because of the scaling disparity. Look, if you want to argue Elemental Shaman shouldn't get the best AoE because it has the best cleave, fine. Or really good cleave, fine. I could maybe respect that, but this is fucking ridiculous. These totems suck balls right now, alright? They suck balls because of a heinous bug that you consider a class balance change. And even from a class balance perspective, the totems in and of themselves are weak sauce. They're dog shit, okay? So, fire totems, serious misgivings about that. Really dislike the state of fire totems right now. And the final grievance I have for Elemental Shaman is, I just gotta say it, Scythe of Elune. You knew it was coming. Okay, you knew it was coming. Scythe of Elune. There's no good reason that Shaman cannot get access to this trinket. I've heard people say that there's some sort of fucking law reason why this isn't the case. There's some sort of fucking law reason that excludes Shaman as the only caster DPS who can't get this legendary trinket. And I just every time I try to press someone for details on that law explanation, all I hear is bullshit. Like, I just hear bullshit. Like, there's no fucking way. Like, you literally read the tooltip for this. Elune infuses your magic with astral power. She's blessing your magic. Okay? Why the fuck would she do that to a warlock who literally consorts with dick-sucking demons, alright? But Elune is apparently unwilling to do that for a shaman, alright? Apparently, it's beyond the pale, right? That an elemental shaman benefit from the blessing of Elune, but the literal fucking devil worshipper, the fucking warlock can get access to this trinket. I just don't buy. If you really wanted to go with like the lore, if you really wanted to be some fucking Michael J. Kirkbride fucking Morrowind lore greybeard boomer about this fucking item, and you locked it to exactly priest and exactly druid, I could respect that. That would be something. But the fact that it's locked to the exact same casters who just got a legendary weapon in the previous fucking raid tier, and Shaman was excluded for seemingly no fucking reason because of lore. I mean, it's just hot garbage. It's just bullshit. I just don't believe you. It smells like bullshit. It looks like bullshit. I can taste your ass in my mouth. All right, it's bullshit. All right, I don't know what else to say. It's nonsense. Garbage. All right. Anyway, that's all I have to say on that matter. All right. Finally, let's talk about restoration. Okay. Now, restoration, it's mostly pretty good. The real shit in this talent tree really starts at this tier. These two talents, I have a great issue with. I have a great issue with both of them. Let's get to the simplest one first, like the most immediately obviously wrong one. Why is restorative totems a prerequisite for improved chain heal? Can anybody answer me this? This doesn't make any sense. These talents have absolutely nothing to do with each other. Let's compare it to the other prerequisite talents, shall we? So, Healing Way is a prerequisite to Tidal Surge. This makes sense. Tidal Surge only procs when you heal a target affected by Healing Way. Okay, that makes perfect sense. Improved Water Shield is a prerequisite for Undertow. This makes sense because Undertow consumes a charge of Water Shield or restores charges of Water Shield. Like, they synergize with each other. There's a reason why they're prerequisites. I'm about to complain about Improved Water Shield and Undertow, but at least it makes sense that they're prerequisites. Why in God's name is restorative totems a prereq to improve chain heal? These talents have absolutely nothing to do with each other. It should be a completely viable talent build to skip out on restorative totems, get some other shit you want here, and then get improved chain heal if you've already invested 20 fucking points into the tree. Like 25 points into the tree. If I'm 25 points into the tree, I should be able to get improved chain heal. Okay? I shouldn't need to... It shouldn't be strictly required in every single serious raiding build that I get restorative totems. Alright? It's a niche talent. This is a niche talent. Improved Reincarnation, that's kind of niche. Nature's Grace, kind of niche. Like, these are all kind of niche talents. I could kind of juggle points away and all over the place through these, and I should be able to do so, but I can't because it's hard required. Why the fuck is it hard required? Okay, it's nonsense. Improved Water Shield. The problem I have with this talent is that before class changes to, as a Restoration Shaman, I feel like for every other spec of Shaman, it is a genuine choice to choose between Water Shield, Earth Shield, and Lightning Shield. You know, there are situations where all of them could be relevant and could be the correct play to make, you know. They kind of offer different things. And there were a number of times in Raid where I used Earth Shield, for example, for the extra pushback protection. Or I used Earth Shield because I felt a little bit under threat, right? Personally, as a healer, that I might die if I didn't have an effect like Earth Shield occasionally healing me in response to the damage that I took. So I feel like it should be a viable choice to use Earth Shield over Water Shield when you're playing Restoration Shaman, just like it is when you're playing any other spec of Shaman. And I just don't agree with baking in this hard talent support into the Restoration tree. Especially with Undertow, you know, if I'm doing any sort of tank healing with spamming a lot of Healing Wave, the mana savings here are so aggressive and so large that the idea that I forgo Water Shield is just a complete non-starter. And the other problem with this talent is that it synergizes intentionally too well with stable shields. And now it feels like Restoration Shamans are pretty hard locked into stable shields and this talent. And I just don't agree with that either. You know, that further restricts and that further pigeonholes me into never using Earth Shield, even when I think it might be a decent idea. And, you know, I think that's removing like choice and removing gameplay from the spec. I don't know why the fuck you would do that. Yeah, I think the interaction between improved water shield, where you get increased mana regeneration, just total mana regeneration from having stable shields, is ridiculous. And the fact that you also don't have to refresh it as much on any fight that's actually continuously depleting you of water shield charges, just makes stable shields far too powerful. It's made like it kind of unviable to go for elemental warding here, for example, unless the need is really extreme. Yeah, I just don't like it. It reduces choices in moment-to-moment gameplay, and it kind of pigeonholes our talent builds. I'm not a fan. And the final issue I have with Restoration is Spirit Link, bitches. Spirit Link kind of sucks my dick. This talent is way too conditional for its own good. There are way too many asterisks, way too many things that have to be just right and in place in order for this to work. So there are several problems here. The first problem is that it's a short range. It's a dramatically shorter range than the rest of your healing toolkit. That's a problem. The next problem is that the target you want to give the DR effect has to be surrounded by a number of other friendly targets in order to actually redistribute damage to them, and in order for this to have any effect. So that's a second conditional aspect. And the third conditional aspect is simply that it's a damage redistribution effect. It is not a damage reduction effect, right? The fact that it is not a true damage reduction effect means that it's a bad idea to actually cast this when the raid is already started taking heavy damage and is running a damage deficit, and you need to catch up on it, right? So in order for this to be effective, you have to have some level of you have to be able to predict who is going to be taking heavy damage and when they're about to take it, right? Specifically. So you have to have foresight to use this ability. So it's very, I mean, that's cool. It's like skill testing, but I feel like there's so many conditions that it's gone from skill testing to simply not really viable to use at all in too many circumstances. You know, it's not viable for me to get this close to cast it. It's not viable to drop my HPS to 0 to cast it. It's not viable because the person taking heavy damage doesn't have any friendly targets around him. I feel like we could reduce the mana cost, or make it instant cast, or make it a true damage reduction effect, or all fucking three, and it wouldn't even be overpowered. Yeah, it's simply too fucking conditional. There's too many asterisks. It's so specific, so conditional, that people go entire raids without even using it. And I think that's problematic. Okay, that's pretty much all. Thank you.